It was an autumn afternoon in the quiet town of Oakwood, and the dry leaves danced in the wind, creating a spectacle of warm colors that covered the ground of the local park. Madison, a 12-year-old girl with light brown hair and curious eyes, was sitting on a wooden bench, watching the clouds gather in the sky. Her heart was beating fast, not just from the beauty of the season, but from the anticipation of meeting her friend Ethan, who always brought a new adventure with him. When Ethan, a 13-year-old boy with a contagious smile and a restless spirit, came running, Madison could feel that something peculiar was in the air. He had an intense expression on his face, as if he were carrying a secret. As he approached, he sat down beside her, breathless, and soon began talking about the Holloway house, an old mansion that everyone in town knew for its stories of hauntings and strange events. "Have you heard the rumors, Madison?" asked Ethan, his voice low, almost a whisper. "They say that whoever goes in there is never seen again. It's as if the house were alive, sucking people into it." Madison frowned, intrigued. The idea of exploring the Holloway house had always fascinated her, but fear also held her back. "What if we just look?" she said, trying to hide her apprehension. Ethan, always daring, shook his head. No, we need to go there, for real. Remember Matt? He always talked about the house as if it were a magical place. He loved telling stories about ghosts and mysteries. The mention of Matt made Madison's heart tighten. He was a dear friend, but he had disappeared a few months ago, leaving an immense void in Ethan's life and hers. The decision to explore the Holloway house quickly took shape. With a mixture of excitement and nervousness, the two friends got up and began walking toward the mansion. As they approached, the atmosphere around them seemed to change. The house, with its broken windows and creaking doors, rose before them like a sleeping monster. The wind blew stronger, and Madison felt a shiver down her spine. "Do you feel that?" she asked, looking at Ethan. "It seems like the house is watching her." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the shadowy structure. The feeling of apprehension enveloped them both, like a dense and inexplicable fog. Finally, they reached the entrance. The door was ajar, as if inviting them in, but also warning them about what might be lurking inside. Madison hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. "What if there really is something in there?" she whispered, doubt clear in her voice. Ethan, however, was determined. "We need to do this, Madison. It's what Matt would have wanted." With one last look back, the two entered. As soon as they crossed the entrance, a strong wind blew, and the door closed behind them with a bang that echoed through the silent corridors. Madison felt her heart race. The darkness of the house seemed to envelop them like a heavy blanket. "Ethan, this isn't normal," she said, a feeling of dread growing inside her. "The house, it seems to be alive." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but he himself couldn't ignore the feeling that they were being watched. The darkness around them seemed to pulse, and a strange energy surrounded them. Madison looked around, her mind racing with thoughts and fears about what they might find. But amid the fear, there was a spark of courage, a determination to discover the truth behind the Holloway house and perhaps find some connection to Matt. They were about to become involved in a mystery that would challenge not only their beliefs, but also the deepest secrets that each carried within themselves. The interior of the Holloway house was a labyrinth of shadows and mysteries. Madison and Ethan advanced down the corridor, the floorboards creaking under their feet, as if the house were protesting against their presence. The walls were covered with dark mold, and cobwebs hung like forgotten curtains, giving the environment an even more oppressive aspect. The sunlight filtered timidly through the dusty windows, creating a contrast between the darkness of the house and the vibrant exterior of autumn. Madison, with her heart racing, reached out for one of the doors that lined the corridor. As soon as her finger touched the doorknob, the door opened abruptly, revealing a dusty room that seemed to have been forgotten by time. The smell of dust and mold was almost unbearable, and the dim light illuminated a scene of abandonment. Furniture covered with white sheets, an old bed with a torn quilt, and a shelf full of forgotten objects. "Look at this!" Madison exclaimed, her gaze fixed on a broken doll that was thrown in a corner. Its eyes, once bright, now seemed opaque, and the sad expression on its ceramic face seemed to follow the movements of the two young people. Ethan approached, trying to ease the tension in the air with a joke. That doll must be the real owner of the house. She looks more scared than we are, he said, trying to force a smile. However, his words didn't have the desired effect. The atmosphere was charged, and both could feel the presence of something else in that room, as if the house were alive and watching them. Madison couldn't look away from the doll. She looks sad, she murmured, almost in a whisper. The tension increased, and Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He looked around, as if expecting to see something moving in the shadows. The feeling that they weren't alone was palpable, as if the house itself was manifesting in its restlessness. Deciding it was time to leave that room, Madison pulled Ethan, and the two left, but not before casting one last look at the doll. As they crossed the doorway, childish laughter echoed through the corridors, as if a group of children were playing on the upper floors. Madison's eyes widened, and Ethan stopped, his heart racing. "Did you hear that?" Madison asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. Ethan nodded slowly, his mind racing with terrifying possibilities. They exchanged a look, and without needing words, they knew that the house was far from uninhabited. "We need to leave," Ethan finally said, the urgency in his voice making Madison hesitate. She wanted to hear more, to understand what was happening, but fear was beginning to infiltrate her thoughts. What if they need help?" Madison proposed, curiosity overcoming fear. Ethan was divided. The idea of exploring more intrigued her, but the thought that they could be in danger paralyzed him. "I don't know, Maddie. This could be dangerous," he replied, looking at the dark corridor that seemed to extend infinitely. But the determination in her gaze was undeniable. Madison had always been braver, more willing to face the unknown. "Let's just take a look. What do we have to lose?" she challenged, and Ethan felt that he couldn't let her go alone. With a deep sigh, he agreed, and together they delved deeper into the house. As they walked, the shadows seemed to dance around them, and the echo of childish laughter continued to float, becoming more distant but never completely disappearing. The corridor forked, and they chose the direction opposite to the sound, guided by intuition and the hope of discovering the truth about the Holloway house and its lost soul. Madison and Ethan stopped in the old corridor, the atmosphere charged with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The Holloway house, with its dust-covered walls and dancing shadows, seemed to whisper secrets of a forgotten past. Madison broke the silence, her voice trembling but determined. "What if we tried to communicate with the souls that inhabit here?" The idea danced in her mind, a mixture of curiosity and a desire to discover the truth about what had happened in the house. Ethan hesitated, observing Madison's expression. He'd always been the more cautious of the two, and the prospect of invoking unknown forces made him uneasy. "Madison, are you sure? What if something goes wrong?" He didn't want to be the one to discourage his friend, but doubt consumed him. Madison, however, was decided. What could be more dangerous than staying there without answers, trapped in the mysteries of the house? With a resigned sigh, Ethan agreed. "All right, but let's be careful." Doom. The two headed to an old living room, whose walls were adorned with framed portraits of a family that seemed to observe their every move. Madison approached one of the paintings, where a woman with a deep and melancholic gaze stared at her. "She looks like my mother," said Madison, her voice almost a whisper. The resemblance was undeniable, and a wave of emotions invaded her. This only increased her doubts about the history of the house and the connections it might have with her own life. Ethan noticed the change in Madison's expression. She seemed more introspective, lost in thought. "Madison, are you okay?" he asked, trying to reach his friend. "It's just, I always thought my father's disappearance had something to do with this place." Madison's confession fell like a stone in a calm lake, generating waves of uncertainty. She had never shared this part of her life with anyone, and now, faced with the mystery of the Holloway house, the words flowed as if they were part of an uncontrollable current. "I didn't know. I'm sorry," Ethan replied, his gaze concerned. He wanted to comfort her, but the truth is that the revelation unbalanced the dynamic between them. Madison had always been the stronger one, the one who pulled Ethan into adventure. Now, she was revealing vulnerabilities that he wasn't prepared to face. "Do you think you can find answers here? That the house knows something?" The idea that the house might have information about Madison's father made him uneasy. As Madison pondered, Ethan decided he needed a distraction. "Let's try to do this then. What do you suggest?" Madison looked at him, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear fear and determination. Maybe a type of invocation, something simple, just to see if we can get some kind of response. Now, the living room was wrapped in a heavy silence, as if the house itself was waiting for them. Madison began to trace symbols on the dusty floor with her finger, while Ethan watched, a mixture of fascination and fear in his gaze. The atmosphere seemed to intensify, and he wondered if they were about to cross a line that could not be undone. "If there's anyone here, make yourself known," Madison said, her voice firm, despite the uneasiness. The silence deepened, and Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. It was then that, with a slight whisper, an icy breeze crossed the room, causing the candles at the edges to extinguish instantly. Ethan's heart raced. "Madison!" he called her, but her expression was caught in a mixture of fear and expectation. From the back of the corridor, a faint echo of childish laughter began to form, as if invisible children were having fun somewhere distant in the house. Madison and Ethan exchanged glances, the tension between them intensifying. "What was that?" Ethan asked, his tone laden with concern. Madison narrowed her eyes, trying to focus on the sounds. "It seems that we're not alone," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. When the echo of laughter dissipated, an oppressive silence took over the environment, and the house seemed to contract around them. Madison, fighting against the fear that enveloped her, felt a growing determination. "We need to know what's happening here," she affirmed, bravery shining in her eyes. Ethan, although reluctant, felt that he couldn't leave Madison alone in this search. The mystery of the Holloway house had entangled them, and now, together, they prepared to dive even deeper into the secrets that the house hid. Madison and Ethan were immersed in a dense and heavy atmosphere as the faint light of the evening filtered through the broken windows of the Holloway house. The cold of the afternoon infiltrated their bones, but what really gave them chill was what they had found: a dusty diary forgotten at the back of a dust-covered bookshelf. Madison, with trembling fingers, opened the notebook, and the yellowed pages seemed to whisper secrets of a lost life. The handwritten letters were uneven, revealing the innocence of a child dealing with deep fears and closely guarded secrets. As Madison read aloud, the room seemed to close around them, as if the walls were attentive to her words. "She had an imaginary friend," said Madison, her voice trembling slightly. "He was always by her side, but no one else could see him." Ethan, who listened in silence, couldn't help but think of Matt. The constant presence of his friend in his life, even after his disappearance, seemed to echo in the words of the diary. Do you think Matt could have had something like that?" Ethan murmured, his mind filled with memories of laughter and childish games. The tone of his voice carried a fragility that he didn't usually display. Madison raised her eyes from the diary and met Ethan's gaze. "Maybe," she replied, "but that means he wasn't completely gone. He's still here in some way." The connection they were forming with the child's story and the pain they both felt for what they had lost increased the intensity of the moment. As the words flowed from the diary, Madison made a disturbing connection. "Look, here," she said, pointing to a passage that described how the child felt trapped in a cycle of fear, unable to escape the shadows that surrounded her. "It's as if this house were connected to us, as if its story were intertwined with ours." The air around them became denser, charged with a sense of imminent destiny. Ethan frowned, processing the implications of the discovery. "Are you saying that maybe the house is calling us because it has something to do with both of us? With our missing friends?" His expression was a mixture of skepticism and amazement. Madison nodded slowly, her heart accelerating. "What if we could understand what happened here? What if we could help?" The desire to unravel the mysteries of the house began to mix with a sense of responsibility, as if they were the chosen ones to face the hidden truths. As they continued to explore the diary, the atmosphere around seemed to pulse with energy. The pages spoke of fears that transformed into monsters, of laughter that transformed into echoes of pain. Madison and Ethan looked at each other, both aware that they were navigating deep and unknown waters. The diary became a mirror of their own lives, reflecting the fears they had kept in their hearts. The evening light began to disappear, and the house seemed to transform around them. The portraits on the walls, which before seemed inert, now seemed to observe them with sad and empty gazes. Madison felt a weight in her soul, an inexplicable connection with the child from the diary. "What if we have to help somehow?" she whispered, determination growing within her. "What if the souls are waiting for us us so that we can free them." Ethan hesitated. The idea scared him, but at the same time, there was something irresistible in Madison's proposal. But what if it's dangerous? What if the house doesn't let us out? He thought about how Matt's presence still accompanied him, a constant shadow in his life. Madison, perceiving his internal conflict, paused and looked deeply into his eyes. "We need to do this, Ethan. We need to discover the truth, not just for us, but for them too." With renewed determination, Madison closed the diary and looked at the door that led to the dark corridor. "Let's face this together," she said, her voice firm and resolute. Ethan, taking a deep breath, nodded, and together they headed to the next room, their souls intertwined by hope and fear. The house, which before seemed like a labyrinth of mysteries, was now a battlefield between past and future, where their stories intertwined in an uncertain destiny. The exploration of the Holloway house was far from over, and with each step they took, the dark secrets that inhabited the mansion became increasingly close to being revealed. The atmosphere in the Holloway house was charged with electricity, as if the air were about to break into a storm. Madison and Ethan, paralyzed in the dark corridor, felt the voices echoing around them, calling their names with an almost desperate urgency. The sound was a continuous whisper that mixed with the creaking of the house, creating an oppressive and unsettling environment. Madison, with her heart racing, stared at Ethan, who had eyes wide with fear. He seemed hesitant, as if he wanted to run, but at the same time couldn't move. "Madison, we need to get out of here. Now," Ethan pleaded, his voice trembling. He could no longer ignore the feeling that something was very wrong. The fear of losing his friend, just as he had lost Matt, consumed him. But Madison, with fierce determination, shook her head. "Ethan, wait. I feel like we're close to discovering something important. We need to understand what's happening here," she said, her voice firm, although her own heart was heavy. Madison had always been the braver one between them, but now even she felt the weight of pressure. The voices became more insistent, not just calling their names, but also revealing fragments of stories, laments of souls that seemed to want to be heard. Ethan looked around, his protective instinct fighting against the curiosity that drove him to stay. But what if this is dangerous? What if the stories are true? What if Matt is still here? The mention of their lost friend's name made Madison's stomach turn. The pain of loss accompanied her like a shadow, a constant reminder that not all mysteries could be solved. "I don't know if he's here, but we need to find out. For him, for all the children who disappeared," Madison replied, the bravery in her voice masking a deep fear that consumed her. Ethan's gaze softened, realizing that their search was more than just for the truth of the house. It was also a way to honor Matt's memory. "You're right, but we can't let ourselves be carried away by despair. We should focus," Ethan said, taking a deep breath, trying to calm his mind. The tension between them was palpable, an internal conflict that reflected the external struggle they were about to face. With new determination, Madison stepped forward, pulling Ethan along with her. "Let's explore a bit more. I feel like we're close to something that can help us understand," she said, looking in the direction from which the voices seemed to come. Ethan hesitated, but Madison's resilience was contagious. He followed, even though with each step, the fear intensified. They entered an adjacent room where the dust-covered furniture seemed to have been forgotten for decades. The faint light entering through the broken windows illuminated the space in a ghostly way, revealing portraits of faces erased by time. Madison felt a chill run down her spine when she noticed that one of the portraits showed a woman who resembled her mother. The recognition hit her like a blow, bringing to the surface memories long buried. "Ethan, look," she exclaimed, pointing to the painting. She looks like my mother." The revelation made her tremble. What did this mean? What connection did the house have with her family? The woman's presence in the portraits seemed to watch their every move, as if waiting for the right moment to tell her own story. While Madison reflected on the connection, Ethan approached an old chest in the corner of the room. "Let's see what's in here," he murmured, trying to maintain courage. With effort, he lifted the lid, revealing a collection of personal objects covered in dust, letters, toys, and yellowed photos. Madison approached, intrigued. These objects, they seemed to have belonged to children, she said, her heart tightening at the thought of their fate. The environment around seemed to vibrate with the energy of stored memories, each item telling a story that asked to be heard. Madison felt that the past was about to reveal itself, but somewhere inside her, the awareness of danger was growing. As they examined the objects, the voices became louder, more insistent, like a chorus of souls crying for liberation. Madison felt an overwhelming impulse, as if the house were preparing to reveal its deepest secrets. She knew she needed to act, but the tension between her and Ethan was almost unbearable. Loyalty to friendship and the search for truth were in conflict, and the weight of this made the atmosphere even more suffocating. "I'm sorry for all this, Ethan," Madison said suddenly, the sincerity in her voice cutting through the silence. "I didn't want you to be here. I just wanted to understand." Madison's vulnerability made Ethan hesitate. He realized that his own friendship with her was also at stake, and the fear of losing that hit him hard. "I just don't want to lose you, Madison. The idea of you getting hurt, it scares me so much," he confessed, the sincerity in his gaze. Madison felt a wave of gratitude, but also an additional weight in her heart. What they were about to face could change everything, and the possibility of loss hung over them like a dark cloud. "Let's go together then. No matter what happens, we'll face this together," she replied, a new spirit of determination sprouting between them. With these bonds established, they prepared for what was to come, knowing that the Holloway house held secrets that could change their lives forever. On an autumn afternoon in the quiet town of Oakwood, Madison and Ethan were determined to face the secrets that the Holloway house hid. The atmosphere inside the mansion was dense, as if the air were impregnated with untold stories. The faint light filtering through the broken windows projected dancing shadows on the walls, creating a frightening environment that made the young people's hearts race. Madison, feeling the urgency to understand what was happening, looked at Ethan and affirmed with determination that helping the souls could be the key to unraveling the mystery that surrounded them. With a firm gesture, she headed to a dusty door that seemed to have been forgotten by time. The door creaked as it opened, revealing a new room that led to a dark and damp basement. The daylight barely reached that space, and a smell of mold invaded their nostrils. Ethan hesitated upon seeing the darkness ahead, but Madison's determination was contagious. They descended the stairs slowly, each step echoing like a distant call. As soon as they entered the basement, they were greeted by a disturbing vision. The room was filled with personal objects, toys, and clothes of children who, like Matt, had disappeared. Madison felt a chill down her spine as she recognized a toy that had belonged to her father. It was a small teddy bear, faded and with one eye missing. Her heart accelerated, mixing nostalgia and sadness at the same time. "Dad," she whispered, the name coming out like a distant echo in her mind. The connection with those objects was palpable, as if each one of them held a part of the story that had been forgotten. As they explored the room, the voices that were once whispers now became screams. The shadows around them seemed to come to life, moving in a threatening way and cornering the young people. Madison and Ethan exchanged panicked looks, adrenaline pulsing in their veins. The door through which they had entered closed with a bang, imprisoning them in that dark and oppressive space. The feeling of claustrophobia intensified, and the reality of what they were facing became undeniable. Madison felt that in that moment of despair, the only way out could be in confronting the souls that inhabited the house. "We need to free them. We need to do something." Her voice trembled, but determination was present in her gaze. Ethan, with a mixture of fear and courage, agreed. They remembered the diary they had found earlier and ran back to the room where they had left it. The atmosphere was changing rapidly. The wind seemed to howl through the cracks in the house as if it were aware of the events that were unfolding. As they opened the diary, they discovered a passage that described a ritual that could free the imprisoned soul. The reading of the handwritten words seemed to provoke a reaction in the house itself. The walls trembled, and the light seemed to pulse in response to the call they were making. Madison and Ethan, now more united than ever, began to recite the words of the ritual. With each syllable pronounced, the voices that were once screams became a harmonious chorus, as if the souls could finally hear their pleas. However, as the ritual progressed, the house began to tremble with intensity. The shadows gathering around them them, forming grotesque and threatening shapes. Madison, feeling the pressure increase, looked at Ethan and realized that the true fight was just beginning. With a final cry of courage, she lunged forward, diving into the darkness that seemed to approach, determined to face her own shadows and those of others. Ethan, in desperation, saw Madison being pulled into an expanding shadow, her hand extended in a desperate gesture. "No!" he shouted, trying to reach her, but the force that separated them was overwhelming. The house, now collapsing, revealed that the children who had disappeared were trapped in a cycle of pain and despair that never allowed them to escape. Madison, in an act of bravery, became the new prisoner, while Ethan was left behind, the reality of his loss settling like a heavy shadow in his heart. The emotional climax of that autumn afternoon unfolded, and the house, now revealing its true horror, showed that the cycle of suffering would continue, perpetuating itself in an endless cycle of pain and loneliness. Ethan, not knowing what to do, just watched as the house swallowed the friend who had become so important in his life. The understanding of what truly losing a friend meant becoming a burden that he would carry forever.